Hello, this is Heather of Shutterbug 101. Today we'll be going over the Canon 6D Mark II and the lens comparison for Canon's 24-70 2.8 L series lens versus the Tamron 24-70 2.8 G2. Let's get started. The Canon 6D Mark II is a full-frame 26 megapixel camera that has 45 autofocus points and is great in low-light situations. It has a fully articulating touch LCD screen, has a continuous drive of 6.5 frames per second, and has an ISO range from 50 to 102,400. This camera has 1080p HD video up to 60 frames, has a microphone port, and has built-in Wi-Fi and is environmentally sealed. This full-frame option for Canon is a great first step into the full-frame world if you want more than a crop sensor. Now before we get into the camera walkthrough of all the buttons, doors, and menus, let's talk about my review comparison of Canon's 24-70 2.8 L series lens versus Tamron's 24-70 2.8 G2. So, when it comes to shooting with the 24-70 comparison, the Canon L series lenses will always have a red ring, so you know it's going to be high quality, versus the Tamron, which is going to be a third-party lens, where they make lenses for Nikon, Canon, Sony, all of those brands, just a little bit less expensive. And they have their 2.8 generation 2, which is their newest version, which they do keep upgraded in firmware, so it keeps working with new cameras coming out. Taking these both out, I didn't see much of a quality difference in between the two when it came to picture quality, so that's good. Bokeh was pretty much the same. Didn't see much of a difference there, as you can kind of tell by the picture comparisons in the explanation video going through the camera that we're going to be doing a walkthrough of. The biggest difference that I found in between the two that could be a make or break when it comes to purchasing this is that the Tamron, I could hear the motor when focusing. It does have a slight whir to it, versus the Canon was silent. I actually didn't hear it at all. So there is a little bit of noise to this. So if you're doing any video or you want to do any video, there's a chance that you may be able to hear this unless you have an external microphone. Versus this, you're not going to hear it at all. Now, whether that is worth the price difference there, because the Canon is almost double the price of the Tamron version, it's totally up to you. Naturally, with the L series, it's going to be compatible for future Canons versus the Tamron, which typically they'll lag behind a little bit in catching up with software development. But because this is kind of one of their top lenses, they have been really on keeping the firmware upgraded for these. And it's possible for you to do it yourself as well. Another thing to consider is that Canon's warranty is going to be 1 year. So if something goes wrong with it, they can trace back to factory. You know, the barrel gets a little loose, that sort of thing. It's only covered for 1 year. Versus Tamron, they actually cover their lenses for 6 years, which is pretty incredible. So if the barrel starts to loosen up, so if you're walking with it face down and the lens starts sliding out on its own because it's a little loose, you can actually send it to Tamron in that for 6 years and they'll tighten it up for you, no problem. It's covered by that. Naturally, both warranties on these do not cover any accidental damage, no water damage, no drops, nothing like that. That's something that you usually have to purchase additional. But other than that, the only difference, like no quality, not focusing distance, nothing, couldn't see a difference in either one. It's the focusing sound. If you listen, you can hear this one not so much. And the warranty that comes with these when you purchase them new. Other than that, it's really going to be the only difference, because as you can see, size is pretty much the same, weight's going to be the same, so it's not going to make a difference in your camera bag. totally your call, but take a look again at the photo comparisons at the beginning of the video, and maybe go into a camera shop if you have one near you to try it out for yourself. Let's go ahead and get started on our walkthrough of the 6D Mark II. Okay, so go ahead and getting started here at the front of the camera. We can see very clearly what model this is right at the front. Canon likes to do that, having it posted right here. So as you can see, we have the 6D Mark II today. This button here is going to be to remove lenses when we have them attached. Right now, because it's just a cap, you don't need to push that button, but if you needed to, you just hit this button, hold it, then you could take the lens off. Then at that point, you would look for the red dot on your lens, or in this case, it would be the dot on the cap here. You would line that up and turn, and it's going to be locked into place. We do have a little door up here, which if we just flip that open. So under this door here is actually going to be our remote control terminal. This is where we're going to plug in a shutter release in case we wanted to have that option of doing long exposures, something like that, maybe like family pictures if you're behind the camera and you want to try and get their attention without having to look through the viewfinder or the screen. We do have an infrared sensor here, which is going to be for a wireless remote in case you wanted to get one of those instead of having it wired. So you do have an option there. Going to the side of the camera, we do have a card slot here. This one does only have one card. It does show you on the door here the proper way to put the card in. There is a proper way. There should be a little corner cut off on your SD card indicating that it should go in with the cutoff corner going in this direction. And of course it is a push eject, which just means it's spring loaded. So to put it in, you want to push down once, it should stick flush in there. To take out the card, you don't want to pry it out. You want to hit it once so it ejects itself. Going to the other side of the camera here, you can see that we have a few more doors here. So under this door is going to be our mic port, so we can go ahead and plug our microphone in, which you would then mount to the top of the camera here to get out of the way. If you have a shotgun mic or a wireless mic for a lav, that's where you would post it. This is going to be your audio speaker, so you can actually hear back audio that you have taken in through video. Now, if you don't have a mic plugged in, the mics built into the camera are these two little dots right here. So this is your built-in mic. It's not great as on every camera, they're not fantastic, but it does get general audio. So if you want more direct audio, getting someone speaking very clearly without any distracting audio behind them or around them, you definitely want to get yourself an external mic. We do have this door here, which is going to be our USB and our HDMI port. The USB is going to be specifically for transferring images if you don't have a card reader, or it's also going to be for upgrading firmware. If this camera has updated firmware, you can always check on that online on Canon's site. And then you have your HDMI out port, which allows you to connect your camera directly to a television set or a screen, so you can go ahead and do like a slideshow of your pictures or something like that if all you have is your camera and a television that has an HDMI compatibility, which is really nice. Going to the bottom of the camera here, see we have our universal screw port for tripods. All tripods are going to have the same basic little screw piece, which will allow you to use this camera, which is great. And then we have our battery door compartment, which again on this one here, it does tell you the correct way to put the battery in, although it's pretty foolproof, seeing that there is a rounded side and a flat side. You want to make sure that you put it in correctly with the contacts facing down. And you are all set. Okay. Going over the top of the camera here. Okay, getting into more of the fun stuff. So here we have our on and off switch. Okay, so I'm going to leave that on for the moment. And we have our mode dial here. So our mode dial has a lock on it. So in order to turn it to a different mode, you want to click and hold this button down while turning. Our green A mode here, of course, is going to be our automatic mode. You basically have no control over your photos while shooting in auto. You're letting the camera take full control, have full opinion of how it wants the picture to come out, which of course is not always how you want the picture to come out. Now, if you're just getting into photography, if you invested in a full frame camera and you don't really know where to start, or you're feeling a little overwhelmed with a new layout, getting started on auto while you kind of get used to all these other features and buttons is a great place to start. But definitely don't let it be a dependent mode for you. I would definitely move yourself into the P program mode once you start getting comfortable with this camera. Program mode is going to essentially be automatic, but it's going to give you more control, like over these buttons here, which we're going to go over here soon, and our quick menu. So you can change things like metering and focusing and those type of things, which is really, really nice. But the camera's still assisting you and helping you out. The TV mode is going to be our time value mode. That's going to be our shutter speed mode. That's going to control how fast the camera takes the picture. So it'll help you freeze motion or show motion, like that nice smooth waterfall effect where the camera, or where the water seems very smooth going over the falls. You can achieve that in your TV mode. In AV, that's going to be your aperture variable, your aperture mode. That's going to control the opening in the lenses. Now, I was working with a 24-70 2.8 lens for my pictures, which gave me the availability to open up to 2.8, but also shut it down to like f/22 if I wanted to. The nice thing is if you have a lens that has a bigger aperture availability, which of course is a smaller number, it gives you more freedom to do whatever you want. If you want that nice blurry background and sharp foreground, or if you're in a low lighting situation and you need to let more light in. To learn more about your P, TV, AV modes, feel free to check out my playlist of my Now You Know basic photography needs. I do go over these separately, what you would use them for and how you would use them. We have M mode, which is going to be our manual mode. This gives you full control, so it's the polar opposite of auto mode, where this mode doesn't help you at all. It just does what you tell it to. So keep that in mind when using this mode. Personally, I've been shooting for over a decade, and I still don't use manual mode as a primary mode. So don't let anyone tell you that if you're not shooting in manual, you're not a photographer. It's totally false. Now, I definitely would be shooting in your manual modes, the P, TV, AV modes, but manual mode is really going to be for when you have a controlled lighting situation like I have here, or if you're, trying to push or pull any settings that you've taken here to kind of get a little bit more light or a little bit more motion or something like that from what your camera is limiting to you with these settings. So manual mode is going to be a mode that maybe you won't use at all, or maybe that you'll very occasionally use. But P, TV, AV mode is really what you're going to be dependent on. B mode is going to be our bulb mode. This is going to be for very long exposures like Milky Way, where you want to do, 5-10 minute exposures, or even longer, depending on how long your battery will last. But that's going to be a really fun mode. You can try this at your county fair, or like the carnival that comes into town with their amusement park rides. You can get some really interesting shots with the Ferris wheel. So definitely try that one out. That one's fun too. And then we have our C1, C2 modes. This is going to be our custom modes. So very similar to how I kind of was explaining with the manual mode, where if you were in a controlled lighting situation, if you found the perfect settings and you use the same lighting like I do for my YouTube videos, you could actually save your settings to your C1 or C2 mode. And that way, if you go take pictures at an event, you go on a hike and take pictures, and then you come back to your setting to continue using your studio lighting, you can just switch it to C1, C2, and it's already set for you to go, which is really, really neat. Then we have our scene mode. So our scene mode, if we open up our articulating screen here, let me kind of flip that about so we can see that. We're gonna go ahead, take a look at our scene mode. I'm aware we have nothing in the camera. So in our scene mode, we can go ahead and see that we can choose our scene. So you have portrait, group photo, landscape, sports, kids, panning, close-up, food, candlelight, night portrait. You know, there's a lot of different options, but scene mode is essentially going to be automatic, but it's going to let you tell the camera that you're shooting it for a very specific circumstance. Like I'm taking pictures of a person, or I'm taking pictures of a landscape, or I'm taking pictures of sports, that sort of thing. And that way the camera can kind of narrow down and go, okay, I'm ready to take this type of photo. Now, if you're in a situation where, say, you take a couple portrait or landscape shots and you go, oh, a bird, let me get into my panning scene mode. Well, then the bird's gone. You've already missed your moment. So don't let scene mode run your life either. If anything, just snap it into auto mode and you'll be all set. And then the CA mode is actually going to be our creative auto mode. So creative auto is going to allow us to do background blur. It's going to allow us to change our colors. Now, personally, I like to edit my photos. I don't like to have the camera kind of determine that for me, because sometimes it can be really wrong and sometimes, yeah, it went really well. But I would personally like to have the control over my pictures and not let the camera have control over it. Now, if you're not ready to edit your photos, feel free to play with all of these. You know, the more you play with these guys and learn what they do hands-on, the more you'll feel comfortable with this camera. The last thing I would want anything to happen for you guys is for you to purchase this camera because a friend told you that this was the best one for you. Or maybe you talked to a salesperson that, you know, maybe thought you could accept a challenge and this was a little too much. The last thing I want is for this to end up in a closet because you got overwhelmed. Because it does happen, and it's sad when it happens, and I don't like hearing it when it does happen. So play with your camera, ask questions, and there's no such thing as a stupid question when it comes to your camera. So don't ever feel that way, and don't ever let someone make you feel that way, that your question is stupid, okay? If you're really desiring education on your camera, it's not stupid. Okay, so enough with my rant. We have our hot shoe up on top here, which is going to be for our external flash. Now, this camera does not have a pop-up flash, thank God. If you know me and my past videos, I am not a fan of pop-up flashes. External flashes are always the best way to go because it gives you more direction, it gives you more control. So any flash settings that you see in your camera are going to be directed toward this, but it is sold separately. We do have our some shortcut buttons here that allow us to change some of the more regularly changed options. Now notice I am in program mode when going through the rest of this camera, because in auto mode I'm very limited to what I'm allowed to change. So in P mode it should show me everything I can change, which is great. So you can see that our screen here has a lot of information. It's kind of our nice little summed up screen. If we hit AF, which stands for our autofocus mode, and then we use this wheel here, it's actually going to change the focus. Now, because I don't have a lens on, it's not going to change the focus, but essentially you'll get manual focus, which is what it's stuck on now because it doesn't have a lens. It has one shot, which is going to be for a single subject that it'll lock focus on, and so you can take the picture. You have AI servo, which is going to be continuous focusing, which allows you to, it'll continually focus as the subject moves, so wildlife or sports photography. And then it also has AI auto, which allows the camera to choose between the two. The next one here is the drive mode. So this is going to change how it takes the picture. So on the single square there, if you click and hold the shutter button, it's going to take one picture. If we have multiple squares here with an H, that's going to be our high burst mode. That's our continuous drive. That's going to be taking the pictures at the 6.5 frames per second. Let's see, this one is just kind of a regular burst mode, which may be a little bit slower. The S is going to stand for silent, so this is a silent shooting mode. Now it's not going to be perfectly silent because this does have a mirror inside that has to clack up, so it does make it a little bit quieter, but it's not perfectly quiet. And then you have silent burst mode, and we have our remote control mode, which will allow you to use that wireless remote. And we have a timer delay, so you can do a 2-second timer. Now, going to the next one here, we have our ISO button. ISO, of course, is going to be our sensitivity to light. So by hitting this, if it says A, it's actually set to auto. If we adjust it, naturally it starts at 100. You're going to use lower numbers like 100, 200 for outside, middle of the day, when it's really bright out. If it's a really dark situation, if you're indoors, you may want to bump it up to like 3200, 6400. Now this can go very, very high, but I don't know why you would want to go that high. If you go up to extremely high numbers, like we just looked at, you get a very noisy image, is what they would call it. It looks very fuzzy, it looks unclear. You may have seen a similar circumstance to taking pictures with a cell phone in a dark room where it just looks really fuzzy. That's because it has to hike up the ISO in order to take it, that or it comes out blurry. Here we have our metering mode. So if we go here, where you see the little dot in the parenthesis buttons, or you see the dot in the parentheses, this is going to be evaluated metering. This is going to be for considering the entire image where it's taking the light from and making it balanced out to that 18% gray. If you have more questions on how your camera meters, definitely look into my playlist as well, because I did post a video on metering. We have our center metering, which is going to be taking the light specifically from the center. So if you have a very specific subject right in the center of your photograph, and that's where you care about the light coming from, that's what it's going to be focused on. And then you have spot metering, which allows you to use this button here with the star to be able to use your auto exposure lock. So say if I wanted to expose for my hand over here, right? It's definitely not in the center of the frame. My camera is in the center of the frame. But if I move the camera over to my hand to press this star button on and lock onto the light of that, and then recompose to have it still set off to the side without it changing the light, at that point you can take the picture. And it may sound a little confusing of how I'm talking about it now, but definitely look into my metering video if you do have future questions. And of course this last button here is going to be a light bulb, which allows this to light up in a dark situation where you're having a hard time seeing your screen. This of course is going to be our adjustment knob for any of these and other settings. This button here is going to be for our autofocus area. So you can make it kind of a selectable point, or make it just general autofocus where it's using all 51 points. Really kind of depends, up to you. This of course is going to be your shutter button, so you push halfway down to focus, push all the way down to take a picture. Now on this screen it'll also tell you when you have a card in these parentheses how many pictures you have left. This is going to be what your shutter speed is, or I'm sorry, this is what your aperture is going to be, because there's no lens on it, it just says 0. This is what your shutter speed will be. It does say that the Wi-Fi is off right now, which we'll go over the Wi-Fi in just a moment, but I would definitely keep it off in situations where you're not planning on using it so it doesn't drain the battery. And then at the bottom here we have our exposure here. So if you go +1, +2, +3, it'll make the scene brighter. -1, -2, -3, it'll make the scene darker. And we'll get to that in our quick menu of how to change that in just a moment. And of course we have our battery level, which is always nice to know where our battery's at. Now, going to the back of the camera. Now, at the top here, you can see that we have this little wheel. This wheel is going to be for our viewfinder. Naturally, everyone's eyes are going to be a little different if you wear glasses or not. And this wheel's to help you be able to see through this clearly. If you've ever been to the doctor where they kind of do, oh, slide 1, slide 2, or one's a little bit blurrier, one's a little bit clearer, this will help you adjust it to see clearly through this viewfinder. And fortunately, once you have it set, you shouldn't have to reset it unless someone else uses your camera and changes that. We do have our menu button here, which we'll go over last. Our info button, of course, is just going to give us, so you have a level option, which is nice. And then we have all of this information here, which also pops up when we do our quick menu, which you can get to with this Q button or pressing the Q here, which we'll go over here in a moment. We have our photography and videography option here. So on the camera mode, when the little spot's pointed at the camera, that's picture taking mode. And if you press start or stop, this is going to go into a live view mode. Now, because I don't have a lens on it, it's just black because it's just looking at the cap. You just press stop to get it out of live view. So if you wanted to use this articulating screen, get kind of a low view or a high view, you know, depending on your situation, you could kick it into live view mode so you don't have to use your viewfinder. And then we have our video mode, which allows us to kick it into live view automatically. And then you would start recording with this button and stop recording with this button. And naturally, it's not going to show us a live view. It wants to make sure a lens is attached before doing any sort of video. But that's how you do that there. We have our autofocus on, which allows us to back button autofocus if that is more comfortable for you. This is going to be our auto exposure lock, like I was saying before. While this one is going to be kind of selecting our zone for focusing. So it's kind of our autofocus area where you want it to autofocus. And you have these selections up here, whether you want to utilize the full 51 points or just the selected areas, up to you. We have the magnifying glass. Now you see that these three buttons are blue. So when these are blue, that means that these all work in the same mode, which is going to be the playback mode. So if I press this button, now naturally there's no card in the camera, so it's not going to show any pictures. But if I had pictures, if I push this button here, it's going to allow me to zoom into the picture to make sure that like no one's blinking in a group of people, make sure something is really in focus. And then the trash can, of course, is to delete those that maybe aren't in focus or that came out blurry, or just to make room for more. And then something important to know is if you're stuck and you're like, I just want to get back to taking pictures, whether you're in a menu or your playback menu here, you can just push your shutter button halfway down and it's going to get right back into picture taking mode. This, of course, is going to be another one of our adjustment knobs. So this knob up here and this knob up here are going to control either shutter speed or aperture, depending on the mode that you're in. And then, of course, we have our set button for just confirming actions. You have your lock button, which allows you to, keep from changing any settings on accident, which is kind of nice. And then we're going to go ahead and go into the quick menu here. The quick menu is going to allow you access to everything that you might change on a regular basis, kind of like these buttons up here, but it all kind of sums it up on the back of your screen. And you can get to it by pushing this button or hitting your touch screen and hitting the Q. So, starting kind of at the top here, if I go to the top, you can change your ISO, which you can also change with this button up here. You can change You can change your exposure. So how I was talking about how it displays the exposure up on top here. In order to change it, you would highlight the box, click set, and you could scroll either up or down to make your scene lighter or darker. This is going to be flash exposure control. So again, you'd have to have an external flash. Your Wi-Fi function, if you'd like to turn that on or off. How your color comes out. So I would keep that on A for automatic if you want to have more control over how your color turns out versus how the camera thinks the color should turn out. Let's see, we have white balance. So AWB is going to be auto white balance. I recommend just keeping it in this setting here, unless you feel like kind of playing and seeing how the camera displays color. When you go to this option here, how it changes color, it's going to make it like more vivid or more muted or black and white. Auto white balance is going to control the temperature of your photo. So warmer, adding more orange, or cooler by adding more blue. You can play with these just to kind of see how, you know, it comes out differently from just having it on auto. But everyday situations, I would have it set on auto. And if you do decide to play with these, you always want to make sure you set them back to auto before moving to another destination, or else you risk your pictures coming out looking really funky looking and then you can't fix them. So something to definitely keep in mind. We have a white balance shift and bracketing option here. We have like auto correct image brightness and contrast, which is kind of an HDR sort of feature. You have your custom controls, which you can actually change your controls to be custom to you. Your focus, how your camera auto focuses. So again, you can change that with the top of the buttons. You know, where your camera's focusing, you change that here. Where you're metering, again, top buttons, drive mode, the top buttons. We've already gone over that. And then we have like image quality, where you can actually change it from RAW to JPEG, or do both at the same time. Now, depending on your situation, whether you want to edit your photos or whether you want the photos to be ready right out of the camera, that's gonna kind of leave you in between, like, you know, what you're gonna choose is RAW or JPEG. JPEG is a ready to use file. You can't do much in editing, maybe brightness and contrast, but you're very limited. Versus RAW, you can edit quite a lot of it and it's going to come out looking pretty fantastic, but you have to edit it before you can do anything with it, like print it or anything like that. So do keep that in mind. Now we're going to go ahead and get into the menu. Okay, so as you can see at the top here, we're going to have we do have tabs that are going to separate the different menus here, and it is touchscreen. So we do have the first tab, which is going to be our shooting menu. It's going to be everything taking pictures. Now if you do swap it to video, it does have different options, so keep that in mind. So a lot of the things in your menu are already laid out on the camera, whether it be in our quick menu that we just went over, or the buttons up here, or, you know, stuff like that. So you may find that I quickly go over things. I may skip things completely, knowing that there's a high chance that you won't use it, because if you are going to use it, you're gonna have purchased the camera for that. But if you do have questions about something that I don't go into a lot of detail of, because I don't think it'll reach, you know, enough viewers, you know, because for a lot of viewers, I think they're just going to be like, okay, now this got boring, and skip the video. Let me know in the comments below. I'd be happy to further explain anything that I kind of skip over. So the first one here is going to be image quality, which we just went over in our quick menu, so no need to really go over that. Image review, which is how long the picture pops up on the back here. If you would like it to pop up a little bit longer after you take a shot, or if you want to turn it off completely, you can do that. Release shutter without card. I would personally disable this. If you're anything like me, where, you know, you got a lot going on in your head, if this is turned on, you can go out, take pictures, and go, oh, how did those pictures come out? I press your play button and go, oh yeah, sorry, I let you take pictures, but I didn't save them to anything because you didn't remember a card. That can be extremely frustrating. So if you have this turned off, the minute you go and try and take a picture, it's going to go, hey, I don't have a card, so you're going to have to fix that. So you can immediately go, oh, shoot, yeah, let me grab a card. And that way you're not going to be disappointed. You have lens aberration correction. I wouldn't worry about this too much right now. Chances of you using that is slim to none if you are just starting out with one or two lenses. Lens electronic manual focus. External speed light control, it's going to be that flash up here. You have your, you have your exposure compensation, which is also in your quick menu, ISO speed settings. All of these are in your quick menu. Keep your color space at sRGB. Picture style, also in your quick menu. Your long exposure noise reduction. Now, if you're going to edit your pictures, I would have this off. If you're not, go ahead and have it on. That way it kind of helps you out a little bit. It does take a little bit longer when doing long exposures to kind of recover because it has to kind of pre-edit that for you. High ISO speed noise reduction, you know, that's kind of your call. Highlight tone priority, I wouldn't really worry about that. Dust delete data, wouldn't worry about that. Multiple exposure, so if you wanted to do multiple exposures, does have that availability. You have an interval timer, you have an anti-flicker shoot. Again, these are tools that you may not use. Mirror lockup, whoops. You can also change your aspect ratio in case you didn't like the 3:2, but 3:2, 4:3 is going to be fairly close to like normal ratio size out of a camera. Live view shoot, if you wanted to have that enabled with that start stop button. Then we have our playback menu here, which we're in, which is specifically regarding the pictures already taken. So you can protect images, rotate images, erase images. You can do a photo book setup, raw image processing. You can crop it, resize it, do a slideshow right from the camera, which is kind of neat. Then we have our wrench here, which is going to be our general settings. So you can select a folder, you can do file numbering if you want it to be continuous or reset each time. You can auto rotate the pictures, which is, you know, kind of neat. Formatting your card. Now this is something that I go over in every walkthrough because a lot of people don't know about it, and if they don't know, they find out the wrong way. Or they find out the hard way and end up losing their images. So, formatting your card is extremely important. Now, I talked about earlier how if you're in your playback mode and you use the trash can, you can delete pictures. This is not something that you want to do to erase all the pictures off your card and start over. You definitely don't want to use the trash can for that. Because all the trash can does is it deletes the visible picture, but it still saves the data. So it's still taking up room in your card. And if you just erase and take a picture to cover it up over and over and over again, that can cause corruption. It can cause a lockup in your card. It can eat away pictures. It's pretty awful. It's, you know, I've seen it happen. It's very heartbreaking. When you format your card, instead of using the trash can, it permanently deletes everything off the card, brand new. That way you can go and use it for a new trip, a new event, something like that, without having any issues, which is great. I've seen it happen too many times where someone doesn't format their card and the card locks up and now they can't get those pictures. And if you take on wedding photography, if you took a picture of that once in a lifetime opportunity and then your card locks up, there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. And there's nothing more stressful, or, you know, there's nothing more that makes you just want to throw everything away than that happening, because it just shatters you. So if you are the type of person to be, you know, reusing your SD cards, because there are some people that just like to put the SD card away and buy a new one for a new event. If you like to reuse yours, formatting your card is extremely important. Now, you don't have to do it every single time you're done with your card, but I would say, you know, every now and then, if it's a card that you regularly use and, you know, it's still, you know, and you're wanting to just start over, you make sure that your pictures are backed up to your computer. You know, you definitely want to make sure that happens, because again, this permanently erases everything on the card. And if you didn't save the pictures to your computer or an external drive or something like that, the pictures are gone. So definitely be careful with this, but definitely utilize it from time to time to keep your card up and running, and that way you don't risk losing any memories. You have your wireless communication settings. This is going to be setting up your Wi-Fi connection to a smart device like your phone or tablet or something like that, to where you can transfer pictures straight from the camera to your device and share on social media, which is cool. You have auto power off, which allows you to kind of help save the battery. So if there's nothing going on the camera, it'll turn itself off in 1 minute. Your LCD brightness, the LCD on and off button, the date and time if you need to change that, your language, the viewfinder display, GPS settings. This does have a GPS option, your video system, you know, all that you're probably not going to change. Your touch control, if you want to turn that touchscreen on or off, you can enable that beep when it focuses or completely disable it if you find it distracting. Your battery info, sensor cleaning, which the sensor cleaning doesn't really clean the sensor. It kind of vibrates it a little bit to try and knock any dust off. If you're seeing dark spots on your images, take it to a professional to get cleaned. Please don't try to do this yourself unless you have been taught properly, because if you damage the sensor, you damage the camera and it's done. It is the heart of your camera. Consider it like open heart surgery. You know, just because you watch a YouTube video on it does not mean that you're ready to take it on just yet. It's very nerve-wracking if something happens. So just let the professionals handle it. Pay to have it done. Button display options, multifunction lock, custom shooting mode. So that's where you're going to set your C1, C2. You can clear all your camera settings in case you found that maybe you messed up something. Camera's acting funny. You're just like, let me just clear all the settings. Let me reset it. And hopefully that fixes the problem. You have your copyright information. You also have your firmware version listed. So you can check on Canon's site to see if this needs an update. And you can do that at home. These are all going to be kind of your custom functions here. You can go through exposure, autofocus, operation, and others. And then you can clear all your custom functions if you need to. And then you have your My Menu tab. So if you don't want to scroll through all these tabs to find that one setting that you use on a regular basis, you can actually add specific items to your My Menu tab for things that you do use that aren't available on the outside of the camera to your My Menu tab, so you know exactly where to go every time, which is kind of nice. Other than that, that pretty much sums up everything about this camera here. If you guys have any questions about this camera, if I didn't go over something in enough detail for you, please let me know in the comments below. If you have a specific tips and tricks video that you would like me to do that I haven't done yet, also hit me up. I would love to kind of branch out. I want to make videos that help you guys learn more and get you excited about using it, trying new things. Until next time, keep your eye out for inspiration, Shutterbugs. Bye.